Darami, I say, whenever I leave the house, and on whatever thing my eyes fall on,
وسلموا تسليما حتى تنالوا جنة ونعيما صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما حتى تنالوا جنة
صبر.
ونعيما
Allah Ta'ala says, Wallahu yuhibbu as-sabirin. Allah Ta'ala is lief for the
School governing body of South Coast Madrasa.
أبصارها
وسلموا تسليما حتى تنالوا جنة ونعيما صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما حتى
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Tahira Jays, and this is an ITV exclusive interview with Sister Yvonne Ridley, a British journalist and patron of Cage UK. Cage UK is a human rights group, an independent human rights group that supports families who are affected by the war on terror. Sister Yvonne first came into contact with Cage in 2003, 2 years after her capture as a chief reporter for the Sunday Express by the Taliban in Afghanistan. Sister Yvonne, welcome. Salamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
Maybe you could just start by telling us a little bit about why you're in South Africa.
Yes, we've come here for the launch of Africa Cage, which is the African chapter of the NGO Cage UK. And where better to have the launch than in South Africa, which is a beacon of international human rights, and with the legacy that it has and how it's emerged from the nightmare days of apartheid. I think that the location is superb for Cage.
What work is Cage Africa hoping to do in Africa, and why now? Why the launch at this time?
Well, Cage first came onto the stage after the emergence of Guantanamo Bay, where hundreds of men have been held without trial, without charge. It is a blot on the face of human rights, and Cage was the lone voice rattling the gates of Guantanamo in those early days. Of course, now human rights groups from around the world have joined in the call for the closure of Guantanamo. But it hasn't happened. But even if it does, sadly, the war on terror, a legacy from the Bush years, continues. And it has expanded. And Africa is a key continent of unwelcome US intelligence. And unfortunately, there are dark sites, prisons, torture happening in certain parts of Africa today under the guise of the war on terror, this never-ending war. And so it was essential, really, that Cage's work would extend into Africa. Anyone going onto the website today will find an eye-watering report on the Horn of Africa about some of the human rights atrocities that are being committed. And so it was, again, coming back to why I'm here, it was essential really that we set up some sort of base here. And after talking to a group of really committed human rights lawyers, the birth of Cage Africa happened.
Many people in South Africa know Cage through Mozambique. And what happened to him, well, he was in South Africa for a time last year and affected a lot of people with his personality as well as his story of being a prisoner in Guantanamo and his book. What is the status of Mozambique at this point?
Well, Mozambique, as you said, was an ex-Guantanamo detainee, one of the many who was released without trial, without charge, and who had to rebuild his shattered life. The whole experience had a huge impact on him. And he has shared his harrowing experience in his book Enemy Combatant, but as a director of CAGE, he has travelled the world working with other human rights groups to try and shine a light on the injustices of the war on terror. We can all see how bad Guantanamo is, but what Moazzam has done and what his research has done has uncovered some very dark corners around the world, which have exposed Western intelligence services complicity with some of the most brutal dictators in the world today. And of course, he was in Libya when a whole raft of intelligence documents came to light, which exposed what many saw as British complicity in the rendition, kidnap and torture of some senior Libyan dissidents. And his work obviously then moved to Syria, because we do know that the Syrian president Assad was an ally of the West, did take prisoners from America to interrogate, as only the Syrian intelligence machine knows how. And Moazzam was hoping that more documentation would come to light as the regime collapses. And it's crucial that when the regime in Syria collapses, as inevitably it will, that the right people get their hands on these documents to show transparency and to expose any duplicitous behaviour. Unfortunately, it's hazardous work. It doesn't make you popular. And he is now in prison awaiting a trial later this year. And, you know, there is a widely held belief that it is because of his human rights work that he finds himself in prison again, although his supporters are confident that the trial will see that he walks free and hopefully will expose more duplicitous behaviour from some very bad people who are abusing their authority.
Inshallah, we hope
Inshallah.
that happens. There's also been a lot of secrecy around Moazzam's arrest and trial, and we know that journalists haven't been allowed to report on the proceedings of the trial or any kind of the inner machinations of the case. And this reflects a broader policy on behalf of the British government towards Islamic organizations and the work of organizations like CAGE. We've also heard that there's been some CAGEs, in fact, had their bank accounts frozen and are now having to fundraise almost door to door at this point. What the British policy towards Islam at this point is sort of crystallized in the PREVENT policy. Could you describe a little bit about how the PREVENT policy works?
Yes, but if we could start first with the secrecy around the trial.
Yes.
It is virtually unprecedented that the British media has been gagged and are not allowed to report on basic things like bail conditions and elements of the trial. Obviously, most pending trials are covered by sub judice, so we have to be careful what we can report, but there are still elements that journalists can, but not in the Moazzam Begg case. It's quite extraordinary that the British media has been censored, has been gagged, using draconian laws that are more akin to a tin pot dictatorship than one of the oldest democracies in the world. So that in itself is quite revealing. And the message is quite clear. the British government does not want to encourage anyone going into Syria or near Syria during this conflict. And this extends to aid workers, to medics, to doctors who see on the nightly news children and women suffering and who feel compelled to go out and help or assist in any way they can. And the arrest of Mozambique was seen very much as a fear campaign to prevent people from going out to Syria to help in a humanitarian capacity, never mind anything else. Now, you mentioned the PREVENT scheme. The PREVENT scheme was an ill-conceived idea brought by the previous Labour government and the British intelligence services. It failed badly, but the Tory government in power in Britain today is trying to dust it down, revamp it and put it back out again into the community. And the reality is it's like reheating an omelette in a microwave. It ain't going to work. It failed the first time, it will fail the second time. It's not trusted by communities. In fact, the only people who seem to benefit from PREVENT are the ones who get copious amounts of government cash to carry out these campaigns in the community, which are supposed to educate, but actually, quite clearly, they're thinly disguised spying devices used in the community, which foment distrust and paranoia in the Muslim community in Britain.
It was quite striking, as you said, walking through the Apartheid Museum and seeing the similarities between the old apartheid government and the current British government policies.
Well, I was wondering where Prime Minister David Cameron got his inspiration from, and it was probably from the archives of apartheid South Africa.
Thank you, Yvonne. We'll be right back.
صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما حتى تنالوا جنة ونعيما صلوا عليه